The Reign of Saul by Ginzberg. There were several reasons for the choice of Saul as king. He had distinguished himself as a military hero in the unfortunate engagement of the Philistines with Israel under the leadership of the sons of Eli. Goliath captured the tables of the law. When Saul heard of this in Shiloh, he marched 60 miles to the camp, wrested the tables from the giant, and returned to Shiloh on the same day, bringing Eli the report of the Israelitish misfortune. 48. Besides, Saul possessed unusual beauty. 49, which explains why the maidens whom he asked about the seer in their city sought to engage him in a lengthy conversation. Saul's first act as king was his successful attack upon Nahash, king of the Ammonites, who had ordered the Gileadites to remove the injunction from the Torah barring the Ammonites from the congregation of Israel. 56. In his next undertaking, the campaign against the Philistines, he displayed his piety. His son Jonathan had fallen under the severe ban pronounced by Saul against all who tasted food on a certain day, and Saul did not hesitate to deliver him up to death. Jonathan's trespass was made known by the stones in the breastplate of the high priest. All the stones were bright, only the one bearing the name Benjamin had lost its brilliancy. By lot it was determined that its dimmed luster was due to the Benjamite Jonathan. Saul desisted from his purpose of executing Jonathan only when it appeared that he had transgressed his father's command by mistake. A burnt offering and his weight in gold paid to the sanctuary were considered an atonement for him. 57. In the same war Saul had occasion to show his zeal for the scrupulous observance of the sacrificial ordinances. He reproached his warriors with eating the meat of the sacrifices before the blood was sprinkled on the altar. 58. And he made it his task to see to it that the slaughtering knife was kept in the prescribed condition. As recompense, an angel brought him a sword, there being none beside Saul in the whole army to bear one. 59. Saul manifested a different spirit in the next campaign, the war with the Amalekites, whom, at the bidding of God, he was to exterminate. When the message of God's displeasure was conveyed to Saul by the prophet Samuel, he said, "If the Torah ordains that a heifer of the herd shall be beheaded in the valley as an atonement for the death of a single man, how great must be the atonement required for the slaughter of so many men? And granted they are sinners, what wrong have their cattle done to deserve annihilation? And granted that the adults are worthy of their fate, what have the children done?" Then a voice proclaimed from heaven, "Be not overjust." Later on, when Saul commissioned Doeg to cut down the priests at Nob, the same voice was heard to say, "Be not overwicked." 60. It was this very Doeg, destined to play so baleful a part in his life, who induced Saul to spare Agag, the king of Amalekites. His argument was the law prohibits the slaying of an animal and its young on the same day. How much less permissible is it to destroy at one time old and young, men and children? 61. As Saul had undertaken the war of extermination against Amalek only because forced into it, he was easily persuaded to let the people keep a part of the cattle alive. As far as he himself was concerned, he could have had no personal interest in the booty, for he was so affluent that he took a census of the army by giving a sheep to every one of his soldiers, distributing not less than 200,000 sheep. Compared with David's sins, Saul's were not sufficiently grievous to account for the withdrawal of the royal dignity from him and his family. The real reason was Saul's too great mildness, a drawback in a ruler. Moreover, his family was of such immaculate nobility that his descendants might have become too haughty. 63. When Saul disregarded the divine command about the Amalekites, Samuel announced to him that his office would be bestowed upon another. The name of his successor was not mentioned on that occasion, but Samuel gave him a sign by which to recognize the future king. He who would cut off the corner of Saul's mantle would reign in his stead. Later on, when David met Saul in the cave and cut off a piece of the king's skirt, Saul knew him for a certainty to be his destined successor. 64. So Saul lost his crown on account of Agag, and yet did not accomplish his purpose of saving the life of the Amalekite king. For Samuel inflicted a most cruel death upon Agag, and that not in accordance with Jewish, but with heathen, forms of justice. No witnesses of Agag's crime could be summoned before the court, nor could it be proved that Agag, as the law requires, had been warned when about to commit the crime. 65. Though due punishment was meted out to Agag, in a sense it came too late. Had he been killed by Saul in the course of the battle, the Jews would have been spared the persecution devised by Haman, for in the short span of time that elapsed between war and his execution, Agag became the ancestor of Haman. 66. The Amalekite War was the last of Saul's notable achievements. Shortly afterward he was seized by the evil spirit, and the rest of his days were passed mainly in persecuting David and his followers. Saul would have died immediately after the Amalekite War if Samuel had not interceded for him. The prophet prayed to God that the life of the disobedient king be spared, at least so long as his own years had not come to their destined close. Thou regardest me equal to Moses and Aaron. 67. As Moses and Aaron did not have their handiwork destroyed before their eyes during their life, so may my handiwork not cease during my life. God said, What shall I do? Samuel will not let me put an end to Saul's days, and if I let Samuel die in his prime, people will speak ill of him. 68. Meanwhile David's time is approaching, and one reign may not overlap the time assigned to another by his hairbreadth. God determined to let Samuel age suddenly, and when he died at 52. 69. The people were under the impression the days of an old man had come to an end. So long as he lived, Saul was secure. 70. Scarcely was he dead, when the Philistines began to menace the Israelites and their king. Soon it appeared how well justified had been the mourning services for the departed prophet in all the Israelitish towns. 71. It was not remarkable that the mourning for Samuel should have been universal. During his active administration as judge, he had been in the habit of journeying through every part of the country, and so he was known personally to all the people. This practice of his testifies not only to the zeal with which he devoted himself to his office, but also to his wealth, for the expenses entailed by these journeys were defrayed from his own purse. Only one person in all the land took no part in the demonstrations of grief. During the very week of mourning Nabal held feasts. What? God exclaimed. All weep and lament over the death of the pious, and this reprobate engages in revelry. Punishment was not withheld. 3 days after the week of mourning for Samuel Nabal dies. 72. There was none that felt the death of Samuel more keenly than Saul. Left alone and isolated, he did not shrink from extreme measures to enter into communication with the departed prophet. With his 2 adjutants, 73, Abner and Amasa, he betook himself to Abner's mother, the witch of Endor. 74. The king did not reveal his identity, but the witch had no difficulty in recognizing her visitor. In necromancy the peculiar rule holds good that, unless it is summoned by a king, a spirit raised from the dead appears head downward and feet in the air. 75. Accordingly, when the figure of Samuel stood upright before them, the witch knew that the king was with her. Though the witch saw Samuel, she could not hear what he said, while Saul heard his words, but could not see his person. Another peculiar phenomenon in necromancy. The conjurer sees the spirit, and he for whom the spirit had been raised only hears it. Any other person present neither sees nor hears it. The witch's excitement grew when she perceived a number of spirits arise by the side of Samuel. The dead prophet, when he was summoned back to earth, thought that the judgment day had arrived. He requested Moses to accompany him and testify to his always having executed the ordinances of the Torah, as Moses had established them. With these 2 great leaders a number of the pious arose, all believing that the day of judgment was at hand. Samuel was apparelled in the upper garment his mother had made for him when she surrendered him to the sanctuary. This he had worn throughout his life, and in it he was buried. At the resurrection all the dead wear their grave clothes, and so it came about that Samuel stood before Saul in his well-known upper garment. Only fragments of the conversation between Samuel and Saul have been preserved in the scriptures. Samuel reproached Saul with having disturbed him. Was it not enough, he said, for thee to enkindle the wrath of thy Creator by calling up the spirits of the dead? Must thou need change me into an idol? For is it not said that like unto the worshippers so shall the worshipped be punished? Samuel then consented to tell the king God's decree, that he had resolved to rend the kingdom out of his hand, and invest David with the royal dignity. Whereupon Saul, These are not the words thou spakest to me before. 76. When we dwelt together, rejoined Samuel, I was in the world of lies. Now I abide in the world of truth, and thou heardest lying words from me, for I feared thy wrath and thy revenge. Now I abide in the world of truth, and thou hearest words of truth from me. As to the thing the Lord hath done unto thee, thou hast deserved it, for thou didst not obey the voice of the Lord, nor execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Saul asked, Can I still save myself by flight? Yes, replied Samuel, if thou fleest thou art safe. But if thou acceptest God's judgment, by tomorrow thou wilt be united with me in paradise. When Abner and Amasa questioned Saul about his interview with Samuel, he replied, Samuel told me I should go into battle tomorrow and come forth victorious. More than that, my sons will be given exalted positions in return for their military prowess. The next day his 3 sons went with him to the war, and all were stricken down. God summoned the angels and said to them, Behold the being I have created in my world. A father as a rule refrains from taking his sons even to a banquet, lest he expose them to the evil eye. Saul goes to war knowing that he will lose his life, yet he takes his sons with him and cheerfully accepts the punishment I ordain. 77. So perished the first Jewish king, as a hero and a saint. His latter days were occupied with regrets on account of the execution of the priest of Nob. 78. And his remorse secured pardon for him. 79. Indeed, in all respects his piety was so great that not even David was his equal. David had many wives and concubines, Saul had but one wife. David remained behind, fearing to lose his life in battle with his son Absalom. Saul went into the combat knowing he should not return alive. Mild and generous, Saul led the life of a saint in his own house, observing even the priestly laws of purity. Therefore God reproached David with having pronounced a curse upon Saul in his prayer. 80. Also, David in his old age was punished for having cut off the corner of Saul's mantle, for no amount of clothing would keep him warm. 81. Finally, when a great famine fell upon the land during the reign of David, God told him it had been inflicted upon him because Saul's remains had not been buried with the honor due to him, and at that moment a heavenly voice resounded calling Saul, the elect of God. 82.